I will.
Ready? Good morning, everybody. Glad to see everybody here today. I can tell we've got a nice intercom system going. Thank you very much, Tyler. All right, this is August 12th, 2025. It is the board meeting workshop of the Swanee River Water Management District Board and Governing Board meeting today. And it is available to the public through youtube.com at Swanee River Water Management District. Just a little bit of bookkeeping here. I'll do some announcements on our schedule. On Tuesday, August 19th, at 9 a.m., there is a governing board tour at Clay County Utility Authority. Tuesday, September 9th at 3, a board meeting. It's our first public hearing on our fiscal year 2025-2026 millage and budget. And on Monday, September 22nd at 3, there is a workshop and committee meetings. And at 5:05, the final public hearing on fiscal year 2025-2026 millage and budget. So we'll put those on our calendar. At this time, we're going to do our roll call, please.
Chair Johns,
Here.
Mr. Keith.
Here.
Mr. Swab,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Sessions, Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mr. Lloyd,
Here.
Mr. Wheeler.
Here.
Thank you, ma'am. If everyone would rise, we're going to have our invocation, our pledge.
Thank you, Father, for this day. Lord, we thank you for your many blessings. Father, we thank you for the rain that we've enjoyed. We thank you for the freedoms that we enjoy here in this country. Father, we ask your blessing be upon this meeting. See that everyone returns to their home safely. And Father, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All righty then, we'll get down to our business. Are there any amendments to our agenda today?
Yes, Madam Chair. Updated is the Water Resources Agenda Item 31, Interagency Joint Funding Agreement with the United States Geological Survey.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the amended agenda?
Make that motion, Madam Chair. Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. At this time, we will open for public comment. And I don't see a card up here. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to do public comment? Okay, there being none, we'll close public comment and move on to our collective consent agenda. Everyone's had time to study up on that. Do I have a motion?
Motion moved.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Susie Hedrick will be playing the role of Robbie McKinney today for your hydrologic conditions report.
Thank you, Susie.
We'll start off the morning with a photo by Mr. Ron Fox from our Office of Water Supply. Ron took the photo during a recent staff visit to Falmouth Spring. And he shared it with Robbie to serve as our opening photo for the July 2025 hydrologic conditions report. So thank you to Ron. District-wide average rainfall in July was 6.6 inches, about 14% lower than the 7.7-inch long-term average for the month. We ended the month with a 12-month rainfall deficit of 1.9 inches, increasing the deficit we had at the end of June, which was just under an inch. County rainfall averages ranged from about 4 inches to greater than 11 inches. The district-wide average falls within the green areas shown on this map. Counties in the northern half of the district generally saw lower rainfall amounts, the lowest amount shown in blue on the map. And we saw generally higher rainfall amounts in the southern counties, including parts of Dixie and Levy counties, which received greater than 12 inches in some areas, shown in pink. A map of the 30-day departure from normal precipitation for July shows the areas that received the highest rainfall amounts that were in pink on the prior map, having a positive departure from normal precipitation ranging from 0 to 4.5 inches. Portions of Jefferson, Taylor, Lafayette, Suwannee, and Gilchrist counties had negative departures from their normal precipitation ranging from 0 to 3 inches. Taking a look at district surface water conditions, most of the stream flow gauges within the district began and ended the month under normal stream flow conditions. Gauges on the Withlacoochee, New River, and Steinhatchee, as well as some of the gauges outside of the district, began the month under normal conditions but ended the month below normal. And all of our Santa Fe gauges began and ended the month in below normal stream flow conditions in July. Taking a look at groundwater conditions at the end of June, this is the June map from the HCR report in June. The upper Floridan aquifer levels were around the 44th percentile. And at that time, most of our groundwater sites were decreasing in level, with several wells in the 10th to 25th percentile range. Those are in the orange areas, and then even some wells below 10th percentile. Taking a look at July, at the end of the month, we had a district-wide average upper Florida and aquifer level around the 49th percentile. About a third of our groundwater sites, particularly in the coastal areas, are showing increases in levels at the end of July. Only 3 wells are now in the 25th percentile range or below. And taking a look at our drought and climate conditions for the district, the U.S. Drought Monitor indicates most of the counties in the district are not under drought conditions at the end of last week. This report comes out every Thursday. Parts of Jefferson, Madison, little bitty sliver of Hamilton and Bradford and Alachua counties are experiencing abnormally dry conditions as of last Thursday. El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral conditions are currently present and favored to continue through the late summer, with some chances of shifting into a La Nina condition pattern in the fall and winter of this year. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration predicts a 40 to 50% chance that we'll have above normal rainfall through October. And similarly, a 40 to 50% chance that we'll have above normal temperatures through October. And speaking of NOAA, they have recently, I think last week, updated their 2025 Atlantic hurricane season outlook. And they're currently predicting a 50% chance of an above normal hurricane activity season, with 13 to 18 named storms predicted. 5 to 9 of those are predicted to become hurricanes, and 2 to 5 of those are predicted to become major hurricanes. So far, we've had 5 named tropical cyclones in the Atlantic hurricane season, with Erin developing into a tropical storm just yesterday. Erin's predicted to intensify to hurricane strength on Thursday and anticipated to continue to intensify to major hurricane strength by Sunday. In addition to Erin, forecasters have identified 2 other areas of disturbance. Both of them have low chances of development in the next 7 days. We are now well into hurricane season, but it is still early based on this graphic, which shows the historic Atlantic hurricane and tropical storm frequencies from May through December. Based on this record, we're in that period where we're ramping up, and I think that follows with what we've been seeing in the last few days. The peak of the season is anticipated to be around September 10th, so we still got plenty of season in front of us and time to prepare. To summarize, July rainfall was about 14% lower than the long-term average for July. We had about a 12-month district rainfall deficit at the end of July of about 1.85 inches. District-wide upper Florida and aquifer levels were around the 49th percentile at the end of the month, with a median level decrease of about 0.3 of a foot. El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral conditions are present and favored to continue through the late summer, with increased chances of La Nina developing in the fall and winter. Parts of Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, Alachua, and Bradford counties are currently experiencing abnormally dry conditions. However, no drought conditions are identified. And we've had 5 named storms so far in the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, with Erin developing into a tropical storm yesterday. With that, Madam Chair.
Any questions for Susie this morning? Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, that will move on to Tom. Anything new? Oh. Did I skip one? Oh, sorry. Yes, I did. See there, I was just gonna run right on over you. Ah, dear. Okay, wonderful.
Staff, what I would ask is, as you're recognized, if you'll come up here, because at the conclusion of this, we'd like to get a group photo with the board. We have some pretty extensive recognitions this morning for staff. The first one is Louis Mantini, and Louis has been with the district 25 years now. And he's worked in a variety of our program areas. He began working here in August of 2000, and he's currently a senior environmental scientist program lead in our division of resource management and environmental assessment program. And if you need a pretty much biologist, wetland scientist combination, Louis is your go-to person, and he has been for me even back whenever I was at the Department of Ag, and then certainly since I've been at the district here. Louis graduated from Gainesville High School. He earned a bachelor's in microbiology from University of South Florida, and then for a period of time, he worked in the food and agricultural industry. Then he earned a master's degree in fishery science from the University of Florida and worked with Florida Fish and Wildlife for a period of time as a fishery biologist prior to coming here to the district. So, Louis, thank you for your 25 years. Thank you. Our next recognition is Robin Tu, also known as Tilda Musgrove. Tilda's been very instrumental here. She's got, we're celebrating 15 years of her being here at the district. She's been a business resource specialist, or BRS as we know them around here, with the district, primarily in the resource management group, our permitting group. And you can imagine some of the challenges that she's seen over the years in dealing with the public and permitting issues that have come up from time to time. And she's always helped that group out tremendously with that. But she's been there since August of 2010. And then prior to that, she was a receptionist beginning in 2009. Before coming here to the district, she worked at a local florist group as a floral designer for 8 years. And she also worked in other various positions here at the district to enhance her people skills that she uses here. She's a native of Suwannee County, and she enjoys spending time with her family, her husband, 3 children, their spouses, and several grandchildren. And if you need to know anything of going on in the district, Tilda's your go-to person around here. So Tilda, thank you for 15 years here with the district. Vince Robinson. The board, y'all seen Vince from time to time up here, and he is a field program supervisor. Vince has been with the district 15 years as well. Since 2006, he was hired as compliance inspector, where he dealt with permitting projects along the river systems that we have. I remember when Vince first started, I was a bit envious of him getting to ride the river. But then after hearing some of the stories that he came back with and the dealings that he had, I wasn't so envious anymore with that. In 2012, he moved to Water Resources, where he's been responsible for installing the hydrologic data collection system, and the various installations that go along with that. He also oversees our ag water use monitoring program, and so Vince is overseeing that entire program area as far as our flow measurements and coordinating that, our groundwater level, and some of the equipment that goes along with that, and maintaining that equipment, which in and of itself has some challenges. He does a great job working with his staff. In 2022, he became the field program supervisor, where he is responsible for overseeing those day-to-day operations, and then also keep making sure that the field equipment is here whenever his reports need that equipment to replace it or to do repairs on it. In 2023, he was promoted to the field program manager. Prior to working with the district, he was a self-employed general contractor and roofing contractor. He's Coast Guide certified as a captain, and he also has an AA degree from Santa Fe Community College over in Gainesville. He enjoys fishing and hunting, diving, snow skiing, spending time with his family. He recently just got back from lobstering down in the Keys, so we got a report from him on that. But Vince also oversees some of the training that we have for our staff for boat safety, and certainly vehicle operations, as far as the training that goes along with how those vehicles are operated in the field. So Vince, thank you for 15 years.
Appreciate you.
These next two gentlemen, I'm sure all of our board members are familiar with one way or another. The first of them is Tyler Jordan. Tyler's been here for 10 years. Remember when Tyler started at the district. Thank you, Tyler. And Tyler is our Chief Information Officer and Ethics Officer. He was promoted into this position as far as the IT side of it. Whenever some of you will recall John Wood, who retired, and Tyler stepped up and has done a great job overseeing our IT program here. And I know each of you have called on him from time to time, and appreciate his service here for the district. He joined the district in 2015, bringing with him a strong work ethic, a passion for technology, and a desire to make a meaningful impact, and he has done. If you'll notice the sound system, I can notice it today, even with my hearing as challenged as it is, here in the auditorium. And Tyler was overseeing getting that, he and Bo were overseeing getting that coordinated and getting the installation completed in a timely manner with that, and it helps tremendously. Tyler has grown alongside the organization. He started out in the help desk as a help desk technician, and then he advanced through the ranks to the associate systems administrator and then system administrator. Today he serves as both Chief Information Officer and our Ethics Officer as well. Steve Schroeder had the ethics role, but then at his retirement, we needed to find someone to fill that role in, and Tyler stepped up, and he's done a great job with it as well. Certainly qualified for that. But he champions a culture of a culture of integrity and ethical leadership, not only within his group, but within other district staff here as well. He's deeply grateful for the talented and dedicated IT and GIS staff that he works with. He's quick to credit their collaboration as essential to the district's success. And with a steady leadership style, a strong technical expertise, and a team-first mindset, Tyler's committed to using technology to support the district's mission and to helping his colleagues to thrive in their roles. Over the years, he's served under multiple leadership teams. He worked with the interim directors Carlos Hurd and Daryl Smith, and then also with Noah Valenstein as director and myself. And then governing board chairs with Ms. John and formerly Mr. Quincy, when they served on the board. Outside of the office, Tyler loves spending time with his family. He stays active through sports and being an engaged member of his local church community. Tyler, again, thank you for your service. And last but not least, I think you all are familiar with this gentleman as well, Bo Cameron. Bo is celebrating 5 years here at the district. Thank you, Bo. I told him he looked sharp this morning. You look great, Bo. He joined the district in 20 and as a computer systems analyst in the office of our IT office. And he took the position of systems administrator in May of 2024. Prior to working with the district, Bo was employed at the county sheriff's office here in Suwannee County as an IT specialist. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in computer science from FSU. And then outside of work, he can be most likely enhancing his skill set, enjoying games, movies, shows, and programming or tinkering with electronics. So, Bo, thank you all very much for that. And that concludes my recognition, Madam Chair. If it's not too much of a burden, if we could get the board up front, we'd like to get a picture with all of our staff.
Squeezing as best as we can here. Hang on. I have to go to my phone to go wide. Hang on. We're gonna make this work, y'all. All right. Yep. Just for backup, nobody move. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
You, that was a wonderful cross-section of the caliber of our staff and our family here, and we appreciate every one of you and appreciate the long years of dedication. Thank you very much. All right. Makes you feel good. Anything else, Hugh? No?
No, Madam Chair, I don't have anything else at this time.
Okay. Tom?
No, ma'am, not much of a question.
Any questions for Tom today? All righty. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, those in attendance. For business and community services, there's 11 items on this morning's agenda, and those are items number 9 through 19. Items number 10 through 14, along with item number 18, were approved by way of the consent agenda. So we greatly appreciate those approvals. The remaining items on the agenda are either they're informational items or items for your consideration. We'll start this morning with item number 9, which will be a facilities update by Ben Glass. And then we'll go to item number 15, and this item will be presented by Kristen Thompson from the Office of Finance, and that item begins on BCS page 16. The next item would be item number 16, which will be presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Pam Shaw. That item starts on BCS page 19. And then we'll wrap things up with Leroy Marshall coming forward for item 17, 19, and I think he's got a special introduction also. Ben?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a quick update on the facilities renovation. As you saw when you came in this morning, we do have siding up on the front ends of the building. They're working in that interior portion of that U is the next place we'll see the siding go up. The color you see on that siding is the primer. So we hope once the builders get far enough ahead with the siding, they're gonna bring the painters on site and they'll begin painting. So hopefully by the next meeting, we'll see some paint color up on that siding. So far, so good. No issues encountered, thus far. Still got a lot to go. Happy to answer any questions.
What's the color gonna be?
Well, we had a consultation about that this morning. I've got to get with Mr. Thomas and Mr. Alexander, and then hopefully I'll be able to answer that question.
Any other questions? Ben, it looks lovely. It's been a long time needed on the siding and getting everything clean and dirt away from the building, but I think you've got a good plan. It looks great.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Krista?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. You have before you agenda item number 15, beginning on BCS page 16, regarding the memo and resolution number 2025-07, the release of fiscal year 2025 to 2026 state appropriations. The Florida legislature has included funding for the Suwannee River Water Management District in the Laws of Florida, Chapter 2025-198 General Appropriations Act. That includes $2,287,000 for operations, $453,000 for environmental resource permitting, just over $352,000 for payment in lieu of taxes, just over $1.7 million for land management, and just over $1.6 million for minimum flows and minimum water levels. The district would like to extend its appreciation to the governor, the legislature, and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for their continued support of the district mission. We do require governing board approval and a resolution in order to receive these funds. As such, district staff recommends that the governing board approve resolution number 2025-07, requesting the release of $6,505,119 in legislative appropriations from the Secretary of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection.
Any questions for Krista? Is there a motion?
Make the motion, Madam Chair.
Motion is second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Pam.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I do have one item for you. It's item number 16 on BCS page 119. It is the resolution 2025-08 for fund balance classifications for the fiscal year 24-25. Just as a background, the district's fund balance and reserve procedures call for us to set aside reserves in the general fund to provide sufficient liquidity in the operations and emergencies. And for the economic stabilization reserve, it should be equal to 2 months of our recurring budget and set aside as committed fund balance. And the operation liquidity reserve should be 3 months of our recurring budget and be set aside as an assigned fund balance, as our recurring budget is at about 18.2 million, which means that we need about 1.5 million a month set aside in these different reserves. So to bring those up to compliance, we need to move $1 million of our unassigned fund balance in the general fund to these specific fund balances. So that would be $400,000 into the economic stabilization fund and $600,000 into the operating liquidity fund. So that is one thing we're requesting. And then the second is back in 2013, the district established the Regional Incentive Valuing Environmental Resource, the river, and the agricultural cost share programs. At that time, in setting that up, we were continuing to support those programs, and to do so moving forward into the next year's budget, we're requesting that we move $1 million into the river cost share program to continue to support it, and $1 million into the agricultural cost share program to support that. So that would mean, overall, we're asking that we would transfer about $3 million from our unassigned fund balance to these particular fund balance accounts. Currently, our unassigned fund balance is at $13 million, and so there's adequate funds there to do that. There's a chart, I think, in your program, in your documentation that shows this, the balances of all of our different fund balance and how they are assigned or how they're identified or classified. So we're recommending that you approve Resolution 2025-08, authorizing the assignment of the fiscal year 2024-2025 fund balance per the Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement 54 classifications.
Any questions for Pam?
Yeah, Pam, is this considered, are those funds considered reserve for us?
Yes, sir.
So the $3 million that we're removing from that reserve, are those funds that we anticipate funding for later, or is it like it's we get funds, it goes into reserve and then we pull them out, or can you?
Madam Chair? So over the years, if we have had surplus funds at some point where our expenditures are less than our revenues, they go into what's called an unassigned fund balance. And at any time, then the board has the discretion to move those into committed or assigned fund balance for their choice. And the river cost share and the ag cost share were two programs that were set up back in 2013 for that purpose. But now the operating and the economic stabilization funds are statutorily allowed fund balance that we can move money into.
Okay, thank you, Pam.
Did I answer the?
Yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I make that motion.
We have a motion second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Want to thank you for allowing the denial to go on consent. We appreciate that. And Mr. Thompson, we will start spending that money, no problem, over in River. So one of the things, I had two things I wanted to do this morning. One is introduce a new professional engineer we were able to hire last month. His name is Zach Sullivan. Zach, will you come up? Zach joined the district on July 21st of 2025. And I will say we immediately put him to work. He came in at 8 o'clock, and at 8:05 we had him in our CFM training. So he came to work, and he knew that. So I was overjoyed that he was able to come and start on the 21st and actually attend that class. But he was hired as Engineer 3 in the Office of Environmental Resource Permitting, our environmental permitting office. He's involved with all aspects of stormwater permitting, including environmental resource, works of the district, permit applications, permit review, assisting the public with permitting application and information. He attended Florida State University and has a Bachelor of Science. And like I said earlier, he is a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. And as I said earlier, he is a professional engineer. He has prior project engineering management experience as an engineering consultant and with the Florida DOT. Zach enjoys listening to music, playing guitar. He also enjoys camping and other activities. So we welcome Zach to our team.
Welcome, Zach. We'll probably work you really hard.
The other thing I wanted to do was to give you guys an update on our FEMA program because there's always something constantly happening there. On July 31st, the district held two meetings. One was in the morning, which was our resilience meeting for the Alapaha, Arcilla basins. The resilience meeting is the last meeting that we do to assist the counties with accepting the maps Those maps actually have already gone effective. They went effective in April of this year. So the meeting was at the Madison County Extension Office, and we had representatives from the Florida Flood Hub, Madison County, FDEM, University of South Florida, FEMA, Hamilton County, Jefferson County, and then our consultants, Dewberry and Atkins. So we held that meeting in the morning. FEMA had requested that we not do two meetings at the same time. So later that afternoon, we had everybody back to do the discovery meeting for, again, the Alapaha Oscilla. As we discussed, we have a rolling 8-year, 9-year timeframe. And so we were finishing up the maps from the Oscilla Alapaha, which we did Greenville and the upper parts of the Oscilla and Alapaha rivers. And so the afternoon meeting was a discovery meeting for the rest of the basin for the Oscilla Alapaha. And of course, it was the same people that was at the earlier meeting, but we were able to propose the next set of maps and where we're going and studying. The important thing there is we're going to be studying the entire Oscilla. Right now, the maps, the modeling for the Oscilla is so old, we don't even have a digital copy of it. So when anybody asks for the modeling, we have to give them paper copies, and that is crazy. So we're going to be getting that done with this mapping that we had the discovery meeting for. As far as the Wakasasa, on tomorrow and September the 23rd, staff will be going out to Levy County at the county complex there, and we'll be there for on the 13th, which is tomorrow. We'll be there in the morning from 9 to 12, and then on the 23rd, we're going to be there in the afternoon from 3:30 to 6:30. Our intent there is to give the citizens an additional opportunity to provide comments. Although we do have an interactive map and citizens can enter their comments at any time, at the request of Levy County, we're going and providing additional meetings to assist their citizens or anyone that has any questions. In addition to that, I will be doing a presentation to them on September 2nd, where we will kind of explain this whole process and make sure that they all understand how important it is for them to provide their comments at this time. So that's kind of what we have over the next couple of months as far as FEMA and the CTP program. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, sounds like you got your work cut out for you, Leroy.
As always. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Tim. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The Division of Outreach and Operations has 8 items for your consideration today. 3 of those are informational items, which are in your packet. The remaining 5 you approved on consent, which we appreciate very much. And that just leaves me with an announcement, which is also in your packet, but we will be having our Lands Committee meeting at the September 22nd meeting. And I'm happy to report that we've received 17 applications for our land conservation acquisition program. So that will be brought to the board to consider those projects and rank them for funding. Certainly, we don't have funding for all 17. And so it'll be at the pleasure of the board which ones they want to rank and pursue acquisition of first. We'll also be bringing a list of water resource developments or water supply projects that we'll ask you to rank so that we can pursue those as well. Those are projects for which we'll use alternative water supply funding, which was provided by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And so that's a completely separate funding pot. So just wanted to prime you up for that meeting we have in September, that Lands Committee meeting. It'll be a beefy meeting, so come. We'll bring snacks and maybe energy drinks so that we're all there and attentive. Because in addition to those 2 items, we have some surpluses and conveyances that we want y'all to consider as well with municipalities. And with that, that concludes my items unless I have any questions.
Any questions?
Caitlin, will there be, a little bit of extra time allotted for us to be able to read over that stuff so we can get a good ranking on it?
Yes, sir, I can work with Ms. Robin to make sure that we give you plenty of time.
Because it sounds like we're gonna have a lot of reading and consideration there. And, I know that we're supposed to make that decision, but, I would very much appreciate the staff's input on that too, and what you guys would like to see prioritized.
Yes, sir.
Is that possible?
Madam Chair. Yes, sir. The staff will bring a proposed ranking to you based on what the water resource criteria provides. Again, it's a relatively objective process. You know, the data is what the data is. And so we'll bring that before the board and we'll bring them ranked based off of that criteria. And then you, as the committee, will make the final call, and then we'll take it to the board and the full board in October.
Now, will there be, the budgetary constraints too included in all that, right? You know, because that way we can see, okay, well, if we do 1, 2, and 3, we can use up all the money, but if we do 1, 5, and 6, and 8, we can get 4 projects done versus, you know what I'm saying? Is there possible to see the budget on that too as well?
Madam Chair, we'll make sure we include the proposed acquisition cost associated with all the projects that are ranked, and we'll include that as a consideration.
I hate to be asking stuff that you probably already know the answer to, but I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we've got the right information where we can make a very well-informed, wise decision. So-
Yes, sir. And Madam Chair, if y'all think of anything else, like Mr. Schwab's mentioning, that would be useful as you consider those packets for land acquisition, just give me a shout. I'll be happy to include it. And if you get it and you don't like it, we'll fix it and send it back.
Sounds like with all this extra work, we might need some staff members to just, you know, to be assigned to help us too, you know, secretary on the side or something like that, you know, just saying.
We'll be happy to help in whatever way we're needed.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The Water Resources Division has 6 items. The first one is just a brief update that I'll deliver for the division, and then an update on the Lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee. Then we'll have Ms. Emily Ducker come up to give an annual water use update, and Ms. Susie Etrick will come up to do the USGS updated item that you have in the packet. Items 32 and 33 were approved on the consent agenda, and thank you for that. As you can see, we're continuing to bring some of these recurring contracts in for approval. Thank you for the approval of the 2 that were on the consent agenda. For the division as a whole, I had the honor of representing the district at a statewide water management district panel, talking through what the different districts are focused on right now. And I will say there was certainly a friendly rivalry between between all the districts in the state, but also there's a recognition that we are going to have to collaborate to meet some of the future demands. It's not just in the North Florida region that collaboration is happening. It's all through the state as we're looking at water supply constraints and how best to meet them and meet the needs of the people. So that was good to see and hear about. The other thing that was driven home at that meeting is that it's critical not just within the state of Florida, but across state lines based on a shared aquifer, that we continue to engage across those state lines and keep track of what's happening to the north. So that was a really good experience. In terms of the Lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee, item number 29, the public comment period for that rulemaking workshop that we had in July closed on Friday. We have received at least 11 comments that we'll be going through from distinct entities that have provided comments. We're reviewing those this week and next week, but we're still planning to come back to the board in September with a request for a decision at this point in time. I'll certainly update you if anything changes, but we're working through those comments. We'll be working to address them, and we'll keep you posted in terms of the timing of what might come to the board next as it relates to the Lower Santa Fe. Unless there's any questions on those 2 items, I will hand it over to Ms. Ducker for the water use update.
Any questions?
I have.
Yes, sir.
You did make sure in that rivalry that you let them know that the 5th largest water management district is the very best in the state.
We
Is that
have a
right?
new term for our district.
Okay.
We are the cutest district.
The cutest district, but I don't know if that's very manly, but I can see that, you know, maybe Dr. Brown, you might feel that way. I mean, you know, no offense or nothing, but, you know, we are the 5th largest, no doubt about it. And that we are the very best. I mean, you know,
We held our own. We held
Thank
our
you.
own.
I mean, we're the only one with an actual river's name in our name, so, hey. Well, St. John's is too, but, it's a little bitty river. It's not that big a deal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. As Amy said, today I'll be giving an update on our 2023 water use. So according to our Florida Administrative Code, water management districts are encouraged to summarize water use annually, and all districts right now currently publish annual water use reports. So today I'll be showing our draft 2023 water use estimates. And if you're interested, all of our water use reports going back to 2015 can be found under our water supply planning webpage listed at the link below. So all water management districts across the state also classify water use into these 6 categories, and this is consistent with the rules laid out in our regional water supply planning format and guidelines. Public water supply, I'm just going to point out a couple things. So public water supply includes water from municipal, public, or private systems that supply potable water to the public, and this does include any water use associated with residential irrigation. It would not include private residential irrigation wells. Domestic self-supply water use is including in anybody that owns their own private well. And then the landscape recreation category is any permitted wells where the source is specific to landscape irrigation or recreational facilities such as golf courses or parks. So there are a few different data sources that we rely on when estimating water use for our report. First, we use population estimates published by the Bureau of Economic and Business Research. And this we use to estimate our countywide populations and our institutional population, which is the number of people living in prisons or correctional facilities. We also contracted with GIS Associates to build a small area population model, which helps us better estimate where people are living inside a public service area or outside. And it also helps us better account for population that we share with adjacent water management districts. Water use data for most permittees is reported to the district through our regulatory system, or it is obtained through DEP's monthly operating reports. And if a permit does not have a reporting requirement, we are currently estimating that at its reported allocation. For agriculture, we use the Florida statewide agricultural irrigation demand base year average water use estimates, and these are produced annually by the Balmoral Group. So just to refresh, this is our 2020 annual water use, which has agriculture and commercial, industrial, institutional at the majority of water use in our district. But 2023 looks a little bit different. We do see a decrease in the total water use from 271 million gallons million gallons per day in 2022 to 260 million gallons per day in 2023. And this decrease is due to the Georgia Pacific Foley plant that closed in November of 2023. And you can see that represented in the CII category over here in orange. Agriculture is still the largest water use, showing around 64% in green. And then we have public supply in blue and DSS in pink coming in both around 6%. And that is different than other water management districts, which have public supply as the majority of their water use. So this graph shows the total groundwater use over time. And although water use has decreased between 2022 and 2023, the increases in prior years have largely been driven by the increases in agricultural withdrawals. And a better visualization of this is shown here. We broke out the water use into 3 different categories. So the agriculture is shown in green, the commercial, industrial, and institutional and power generation shown in orange, and you can see that decrease from the Foley water use at that end point. And then public supply, domestic self-supply, and landscape recreation in blue. So based on this breakout, you again can see that ag water use is driving the upward trend. However, we are still very focused and invested on improving efficiencies for not only agriculture, but also commercial and public supply as well. And so I'll orient yourself to this graph. So population is shown in orange with the axis on the right side, and water use, public supply and domestic self-supply water use in blue with the axis on the left side. So based on this graph here, you can see there has been some fluctuation in the public supply and domestic self-supply water use in the recent past. You can see this in the annual water use estimates. However, despite our growing population, we have become more efficient and conserved more water use, which is leading to less overall water use per person. We are seeing this being reflected in our residential per capita rates, which have not fluctuated a whole lot in the recent years. But that just means that this uptick in recent years for water use associated with population is from the growing population. So for estimating agricultural irrigated acreage and water use, the district reports monitored ag irrigation data to Balmoral, and that is then used in the Florida statewide agriculture and irrigation demand average year estimates. So this graph shows the updated FSED 12 iteration with base year of 2023, and the base year estimates from the FSED are reported in the circles with the current projections in the squares. For the most recent iteration, there's a projected 14% increase in irrigated acreage from 2023 to 2015, and that is shown in this green line with the axis on the right. The largest increases are projected in Gilchrist, Lafayette, Levy, and Suwannee counties, with an increase of 3,000 to 4,000 irrigated acres for each county. And the average year water demand from 2023 to 2015 shows a 13% increase, and that's shown in the blue with the axis on the left. The largest increases in water use are also shown in those same counties, Gilchrist, Lafayette, Levy, and Suwannee, and anywhere from 3 to about 3.5 MGD per county. The crops with the largest increase are field crops, fresh market vegetables, and hay. And then this orange line is the conservation estimate, and that uses long-term trend data to estimate the potential future conservation. Based off these estimates, investing in conservation will help us meet our future demands. For future improvements in our data set, we are planning to look more in depth at our agricultural monitoring data and potentially incorporating that into our planning process. But when we have results, our plan is to bring that information back to the board for either an update or a future workshop to discuss. So our next steps are to finalize and post our 2023 annual water use report. We anticipate this being posted by early next week. And then 2023 will be the last year of our next planning cycle. And so that data will be reviewed with stakeholders as part of our planning process. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Help me understand. When we monitor water use, I get that. That's simple. What kind of matrix do you use to estimate unmonitored water use?
Like I said, right now we are not estimating unmonitored water use. For the different categories, it is reported to the district. The only estimate we're using currently is those that do not have a reporting requirement. Those would be legacy permits. We're just estimating those at allocation. So it's whatever is written on their permit.
Well, just like residential wells and irrigation, and some have 1 acre gardens and all this water use, none of this is monitored. So how do we estimate to get a graph of our water use? I mean, it's got to be more than a small line in the graph. Do you have any idea what percentage that might be that's being left out?
We're actually working on coming up with a process to estimate our irrigation water use, and also our small CII, so your gas stations. That's actually one of the projects our intern this summer was working on. So I'd be happy to bring that information to you and show that to you in a future workshop. But that information currently is not in these estimates in these graphs. Yeah.
How is domestic sales supply? I know it's interspersed with like small public supply, but how domestic sales supply?
Yes.
Which is like, I think what you're talking about.
Right.
Residential and look that well.
Yeah, so we use the Bieber countywide estimates of population, and we use the information from the small area population models. So with that population model, we get an estimate of residential housing units. And so we take those housing units and we multiply that information out. That gives us our served population within a service area. We also have the public supply data requests that we've been sending to utilities each year. And in that data, we get information regarding the water use that is split between residential use and commercial use. And so with that, we have population from utilities and water use from utilities. And so we can calculate a per capita rate, and we call that our residential per capita rate. We do that for all of the utilities in our district, and then we use that per capita rate. We get an average for the county, and we apply that to the difference in population between the county population and the served. And so that's how we are currently estimating our DSS water use.
Okey-dokey.
Any other questions? Can you go back to your last graph? Okay, the orange line, is, the conservation projection. How did you come up with that one?
So this conservation projection comes from the FSED dataset. The orange line is the conservation estimate from FSED. It uses long-term data trends from the USDA's Irrigation and Water Management Survey. It's a dataset from 1978 through 2018. The survey estimates show that over the entire time period for which data is available, the average farmer in Florida has decreased the amount of water used by 6,600 gallons per acre per year. And this trend is used for current irrigated fields that are not considered drip or micro sprinkler irrigation. And a more conservative trend from 2003 to 2018 shows that approximately 5,200 gallons per acre per year in improvement is used for the newly irrigated fields, or those that are drip or micro sprinkler. So it takes all of that efficiency information into their model when they're projecting out that conservation demand.
So a lot of that comes from our ag cost share where we're doing efficiency help for the farmers.
Yes, I think this supports the need to continue our ag cost share program because you can see how much water we will hopefully conserve in the future.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, my observation is I'm pleasantly surprised that consumption doesn't go up any more than that by 2050. I mean, that's a pretty good ways out in the future. I mean, conservation obviously has a big role in that. If we can implement those, then it's not. My concern, I guess, over time is that we have to find ways to, to replenish the aquifer and recharge it. And I know all that's coming down the pipe over the next few years, which hopefully would, that curve goes up and those trend down or at least trend moderate. And it seems to be achievable at that point to me.
Gotcha. On the graph that showed water usage before this one, what do you account for that real rise in water use back in the 80s and 90s?
So some of that rise is due to how the data was estimated, though that public supply and DSS water use back in the 80s was estimated from the USGS. I'm not entirely sure how they got that data, so I would have to go back and review that.
So do we think our data matrix is better, or, you know, was there fault with the first one that showed a lot of water use? And then we redevelop a matrix and the water use goes down, but did it actually? I mean, where's the credibility here?
Madam Chair, I'm confident on the estimates back to 2015, because we have worked with GIS Associates in creating the small area population models to get a better handle on our population and the amount of water use associated with that.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Some of the differences, for sure, differences in methodology, and it is, as Mr. Keith has pointed out, very difficult to estimate how much people whose wells are not metered are using. The assumptions of the past, the USGS documents their residential per capita assumptions that they used for some of those past studies. But again, they were using the information they had. One of the things they didn't have was an estimate of residential per capita water use that we're now trying to calculate from our municipalities. But that still relies on the assumption that residential use within a municipality is the same as residential use in more rural areas. And I'm sure for some people it is, and for some people it isn't. So we're continuing to try to refine our estimates, and some of that's going to be trying to tease out what we think like sod-based irrigation at households looks like, and whether we can estimate, again, with perhaps new and better data, how much water use occurred. But if you think in general of what water use looked like in the 80s and 90s up to today, there has been a substantial investment across the entire state of Florida in being more efficient with water. And so I think some of the change that you're seeing there is a true increase in efficiency of use of water. There's more of a respect for trying to be careful about how much water is being used. And a lot of that was driven home in 2000 when we had those real bad droughts in 2000, plus all the growth that happened prior to that. So some of it is a change in methods. Some of it is having better data available to use to make estimates. And some of it is true efficiency that has occurred, that people are more efficient with water than they used to be.
So some of this can be attributed to the educational side?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Nice job, guys. You're gonna get a pie one day.
Any other questions? Okay, that was very enlightening. Thank you.
Hi again, Madam Chair. Still morning, too.
Yes, it
All right.
is.
So for agenda item 31, which is on Water Resources, page 1, I have for your and the board's consideration the fiscal year 2026 interagency joint funding agreement with the United States Geological Survey. You have an updated memo and funding table in your packets. And those update the total agreement amount for the JFA. A little bit of background for folks who are not familiar with this joint funding agreement. The district has cooperated with the USGS since the 1970s to collect water resources data from major surface water stations throughout the district. And under the agreement, the USGS operates and maintains the data collection sites, provides data quality assurance, and publishes the data in real time for us. And last month, I came to the board and presented to you all information about recent and upcoming changes to the joint funding agreement that will affect monitoring at several of our stations. And so today I'm coming to you with the 2026 joint funding agreement. Tyler, if you could show, I have a few slides to share with you. Thank you, Tyler. In fiscal year 2026, the joint funding agreement will support water resource monitoring at 31 surface water sites throughout the district shown on this map. Now, the stations on this map are symbolized to distinguish the types of data that will be collected at each. The work funded by this ongoing agreement provides essential information that supports flood forecasts and warnings for the stations circled in red here. And several of the long-term stations circled in white here also serve as compliance gauges for our minimum flows and minimum levels. Data collected through this joint funding agreement are provided in real time to the public by the USGS web pages for each collection site. This is the Swanee River at Branford station. And data are also provided real time through the district's river levels webpage and the district's automated river level phone service. Table 1 in your packet provides a detailed budget showing the USGS costs to operate each monitoring station for fiscal year 26 and a breakdown of the proposed cooperative funding. There's an approximate 3% cost increase this year over last year, which we did anticipate. And Tyler, if you could please return to the memo. Thank you. Madam Chair, the staff recommends the governing board authorize executive director to execute an interagency joint funding agreement and no-cost amendments with the United States Geological Survey for water resource data collection services for a total agreement amount not to exceed $808,030, with the district contributing $559,340 for the fiscal year 2025-2026. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
the amount that's on our information is $1,090,860. Did that change?
Madam Chair? Yes, that changed, I believe on Friday. We sent out an updated amount, and the reason it changed is in all years prior, as far back as I can see, in the joint funding agreement, the USGS has included amounts that other agencies or other entities pay towards monitoring within our district. So that includes DEP for like monitoring at Troy Springs or Ichetuckney. It also includes DOT funding for some of our federal priority stream gauging stations. And so this year, they decided to pull that that part out of the total and just reflect the part the district's paying and the part the USGS is paying to be reflective of the total agreement amount. So our share has not changed from the original memo, as you will notice, and neither has the USGS's actual share.
That was going to be my next question, is why didn't our share drop if the total did? But you explained it well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Ms. Thompson, the agenda item that Tilda mentioned earlier as being an updated item, that was, we have to list that when that change comes about. So that was the agenda item change.
I figured those got involved and dropped it by $200,000. I didn't. It's good answer there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Make a recommendation, Madam Chair.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Steve.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board. Good to be here this morning, and it's great to work with the staff that we have here at the district, so I'm very appreciative of that. A couple of announcements that I've got this morning. Amy mentioned representing the district down at a conference with the other districts represented. I had the good fortune of substituting for Dr. Brown at a meeting up in Georgia. I'm sure I did not represent the district as well as she would have, but I tried. But I had the good fortune last week to attend and present up at the Swanee-Satilla Water Planning Council meeting. We met in the large town of Ambrose, Georgia. Beautiful area, lots of good farming going on up there. But with that group, they are essentially the water management district for that river region. It's actually made up of, they've got 23 members listed. And just a little information, that they actually go through a similar process that our board members do as far as being appointed by the governor, and then confirmed by the Senate up there. And Dr. Mark Masters, who I've known for a number of years, he was formerly with UGA, but he heads up that group. And Mark actually works with the Georgia Water Planning and Policy Center. So essentially, he's got statewide responsibilities to help set water policy in Georgia. And, excuse me, he's been working very closely with our staff here. Some of the information that Emily was presenting here, she has been in close contact with Mark over the years, and Amy has worked with him as well in getting some of the water use up in Georgia for our area. They're in the process of revising their regional water plan. And it's a little bit different than our water use report, in though that report does entail water use up in Georgia. But it also works towards developing water policy or listing water policy with it. I kind of gave Mark a hard time because one of the flyers that they had, he had presented for the meeting last week. I told him, that looks like Florida colors. You know, I said, that's got to be a good report then with that. He didn't think it was quite as humorous, but that's okay. But they are very aware, and that he did a great job last week in educating that group. They've got a lot of new members that are being appointed to that council. And I think he did a great job educating them about what that council's responsibilities are. That they're also non-paid positions, but the ramifications of the decisions that they make, similar to my board here with it. And so it was some good discussion with them. I was able to present on our water use information here. Some of the practices, the technology that's out there, some of the challenges that we have from a water supply and water quality perspective with that. They are somewhat limited, at least from the agricultural program area, relative to the cost share that is available to them. And they are working on it. They've recently been awarded a master irrigator grant there, whereby they can start assisting their ag producers with implementing some of the technology that we have here. The soil moisture probes is one of the primary items, but certainly the control panel updates with it. And their producers are readily accepting that technology and embracing that technology. So I'm hopeful that they're successful with obtaining additional funding to help out with that water use. In 2020, their agriculture for that Swanee-Satilla region, that southeast region, it made up about 78% of their water use in that area. And for us, for 2023, the data that Emily just presented, ag water use is 64% for our water use in there. So I invited Mark to come down. I'd like for him to present to the board. He was receptive of that. So in a future meeting, we'll have him come down and just give a presentation about what Georgia is doing relative to water supply planning going forward. A couple of things I want to remind you of. It's already been mentioned at one point, but next week we do have the tour over at Clay County Utility coming up for our governing board. The intent with that, and we'll make sure we send out additional information. But the intent with that is to travel over, be at their headquarters in Middleburg at 9 o'clock. We'll have transportation for the board, provided if you so choose to go that route. And then we'll go out and see some of their water reclaim sites, also their operational facilities that they have there, and go see their Project Quench, which is a reuse project that they have. They've won national awards for it. and the treatment that goes along with that water. Jeremy Johnson, who is the director there at Clay County Utilities, excited about us coming over, and we'll go with that. We may have, if time permits, we may have an additional stop in the afternoon on the return ride to look at some technology relative to water quality treatment that St. John's has in place over there on one of their sites. Remember, in September, we have our board meeting in the afternoon. That'll be on the 9th of September. That'll be at 3 o'clock, and then we'll have our first public hearing at 5:05, time certain with it. And then our final public hearing will be at the end of the month on the 22nd. We'll have a workshop, some workshops at 3 o'clock then as well, and then also our public hearing at 5:05 again. And for today, we do have a workshop item. I believe Sean will be presenting on our district MFLs, and then also we have an audit committee with our internal inspector general here. They're in audience already, so we'll have a committee meeting with that. And with that, Madam Chair, that's my report, unless the board has questions.
Any questions for Hugh? Yeah.
The Georgia group.
Yes, sir.
They're in their infancy. They're just.
No, sir, they've been around for some time. It's been limited, the activity that they've been engaged with, and similar to water use here over the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years in Georgia, the awareness of water and how it's used and the supply concerns going forward with it. So Mark's actually been tasked with somewhat re-energizing that group, and as I mentioned, they have several new members that are coming into that council that are being appointed. They've had some that some of the members, for whatever reason, were not as active, and they've just had some turnover in that group.
So do they have the funding to do projects like United States Geological?
Right now, they're primarily funded through Georgia's Environmental Protection Department. It's very limited what they have as far as available funding for projects, large projects. Typically, they can make suggestions and recommendations as to those projects, and then they're usually implemented by, for us, it would be our Department of Environmental Protection.
So right now, we wouldn't really get much data information from them.
Well, we've been getting some good water use information, and certainly I would defer to Amy or Emily, as to the extent of data. But they have been collecting some water use information with it, because they actually have a metering. They have in the state of Georgia, they got over 17,000 meters installed for water use.
This is in the same aquifer section.
This Swanee-Satilla group, yes, sir. The council oversees.
They monitor that aquifer?
Yes, sir. They do. It's both surface water and groundwater.
Any other questions? All right. Since we've got a committee meeting for the audit committee, and then we've got a workshop, we're going to take a break. I'm going to ask to close the board meeting, and Mr. Keith needs to leave a little early today, so if it's all right with everybody, we'll go into our audit committee meeting and then go into the workshop. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, all right. Is there a motion to adjourn our board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
We have this motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. If y'all will be back here at 10:30. back again. Hi, Miss Pam. I'm going to call to order our Swanee River Water Management District Audit Committee meeting, and you can join us in the public by the youtube.com at Swanee River Water Management District. It is August 12th, 2025, and could we get a roll call, please?
Chair Johns,
Here.
Mr. Keith,
Here.
Mr. Swab,
Here.
Mr. Lloyd,
Here.
Mr. Sessions. Madam Chair, there is a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. At this time, we will open the meeting to public comment. There being none, we'll close public comment and go into our discussion and action items. Hi, Ms. Pam.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Members of the committee. So we're here to have an audit committee meeting, and first of all, what I wanted to do is kind of give you a real quick overview about types of auditors that we do have come through here on a regular basis. One is our financial auditor, which is an independent CPA firm that we put out for bids, and we pay them to come in every year to do a financial audit for us. That's Powell and Jones. Another group that come in is our Inspector General, which is here today to present their annual report and their audit findings. These are also independent contractors that we hire to come in according to statute. It's actually section 373-079 of the Florida statute that requires water management districts to hire a inspector general to perform audits at the pleasure of the board and report directly to you. And that's here, the folks that are here today are Jeffrey Adams, who is the audit manager with Law Red Crona and Monroe, and Sam McCall, who is our inspector general. So you'll be hearing from them momentarily. The third group are the auditor general. They are employed by the state, and they are mandated to do a operational audit of the district every 3 years. We don't pay them, they're paid by the state, and so they come in every 3 years. We have just had them come through here. They were here from April to July. They did a pretty thorough investigation and audit of us, and we will be hearing from them in the future. We don't have their final report. I think you may have heard some, reports about what's coming, but we will hear about those in the coming months. So, but what we have today is our Inspector General reports. We have 4 items that we're bringing to you today. The first is the acceptance of the Inspector General Audit Report 2501, which is the follow-up of a district corrective actions from prior audits. So I'm going to bring Jeffrey up here. He's going to talk to you about that audit report.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I don't know if you remember my predecessor, John Ingram. He retired in late June. He was also a gentleman with a bald head and a beard. But I'm a new face, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. Our report 25-01 was a follow-up on report 24-01, which had 4 observations, which are confidential and exempt from public disclosure per section 119.0725. To sum up the results of our work and the report, there were 4 issues that we followed up on. 3 of those issues we believe were corrected sufficiently, and 1 was addressed sufficiently by staff. And we do appreciate the support that staff provided in responding to our audit issues. And I think that's about all I could say about that report. But it was, again, cybersecurity in nature, and we believe everything that we found was corrected sufficiently.
If there are no questions about that audit, the recommendation is the acceptance of the Inspector General Audit Report number 2501, the follow-up on district corrective actions regarding prior internal audit findings from Law Red Crona and Monroe.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you. Our second item is the Inspector General Audit Report number 2502 about its land acquisition and management. Jeffrey will also give you a report on that.
Been a long time. Madam Chair, members of the committee, it is my pleasure to present to you Report 25-02, which is not confidential and exempt from public records. This audit, our objectives were to review the land acquisition, land management activities of the district for the period January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2024. The audit included 3 land acquisitions, 2 land exchanges, and the latest conservation easement acquired/owned as of December 31, 2024. We also reviewed the district's land management plan and land management team activities reporting. We concluded that the district's land acquisition and management activities included in the scope were well documented and demonstrated compliance with the Florida statutes, district administrative rules, and governing board directives, as well as district procedures. There were no dispositions during this period, so we didn't look at any dispositions. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Jeffrey? Nope. All right.
I appreciate your time, and I'll be back to present the plans for the
Wonderful.
next year.
Don't go far.
And I really want to give a shout out to Caitlin Potter and Lorna for all the work that they did for assisting with this audit. It was a really great effort. So the recommendation is to approve the audit committee recommendation to accept the Inspector General Audit Report number 2502, Land Acquisition and Management from Lawreg, Crone, and Monroe.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so our third item is going to be presented by Sam McCall, our Inspector General. It is the annual report of the District Inspector General activities for fiscal year 24-25.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Governing Board. It's nice to see familiar faces. It means if I'm seeing you, you're still seeing me, so that's a good thing. I'm here today to present our annual report. Jeffrey's presented the first 2 audits that we did during the year, so I won't go over those. The only thing I would like to mention is on the second audit, the land acquisition audit. I hope you noticed at the back of that report, we have a table there that shows the land acquisitions, there were 3, land exchanges, there were 2, and conservation easements, there were 1, along with the maps of where all those are. So as a reader of audit reports that I've done all my life, it's always good to see a photo, a picture of what you're talking about. So that's why we provided those maps to you this year. As Pam mentioned under Chapter 373, the Inspector General has to follow all the requirements of the Florida Inspector General Act. That's Chapter 20.055 of the Florida statutes. In terms of your audits by the Auditor General, I worked there 30 years, so I'm always available to Mr. Thomas and his staff when you have the Auditor General come in and tell you how you can do things better to the extent you want it, to provide advice on how to read those reports, how to respond to the auditors, so you don't wind up with them rebutting your comments, because that's always a possibility. The same with your audit that should be ongoing up from the Office of Program Policy and Accountability. I sat in on the entrance conference for that audit. I'm available to give you any advice there. I supervised that unit many years ago when it was under the Auditor General. As far as our annual report goes, a few things I'd like to point out briefly. I know your time is valuable. The requirement of us in the annual report is, and our requirement to do audits is do financial compliance audits, investigations as they may come up, to supervise and coordinate investigations, provide this annual report to you today, and to self-report to you if anyone makes a complaint against me or our firm, to make sure you're aware of that. I can say to you that we had no complaints during the last fiscal year, nor have we had any since we've done the audits for you in terms of any improprieties on behalf of us. Our staff during this year was myself, John Ingram, who retired. John was a very smart man. He did a lot of good work, so was honored to work with John. Jeffrey is now a person to represent us before the district in terms of the audits. I continue to supervise and discuss the audits with him. I work with Jeffrey at the Auditor General's office, and when I went to Florida State University, we actually did an audit together at Florida State University. So I can assure you that John was well qualified. Jeffrey is also well qualified for this position. The two audits we've already discussed. I'll say to you in a few minutes, Jeffrey's going to talk to you about a proposed audit this year of revenues, and that involves timber sales. I think that's going to be a very interesting audit. We did that audit at the Northwest Florida Water Management District. Initially, we said, well, we're going to look at revenues, what we were paid. And the downside of those type audits, if you just look at revenue, is you can say revenues of record were deposited. They didn't tell me about the revenues you received that never were deposited. So what we said, let's look at this real thoroughly, which we plan to do here. But we went back and looked at how monies are collected relating to timber sales. And I know I heard an earlier discussion about hurricanes. We're all experiencing that, and you sometimes have timber on the ground, you've got to get rid of it, or you have timber that you want to harvest and plant different types of timber there in the future. So that was very interesting to me and to our firm. What we did in that audit, we looked at the process followed to identify timber that needs to be harvested, how you go about selecting vendors to collect that timber, how you account for the three-part ticket they used at Northwest Florida. I don't know what you use here, but we'll learn about that to account for the timber sales. So there's a three-part ticket that's just as good as money. So we looked at the controls over the tickets, because when you give those tickets out to a person that harvests timber, those tickets that are not used, you want them to come back to you so you can account for timber sales tickets. So we went out and did some field work on that and looked at the tags that are put on the log truck as it goes to the mill, the way the timber's weighed and sold, and the money that comes back to make sure there's accountability for all that. So I think that's going to be a good, interesting audit that I'm sure you will all enjoy and appreciate. In terms of any additional services I provided this year to the district, we had a citizen complaint come in. I received those. Sometimes citizen complaints come to the Inspector General of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I've known that Inspector General at FDEP for over 20 years. She lets me know when things happen here. She doesn't interject herself into what I'm responsible for. And I'll say to you today, I don't interject myself into what your staff is responsible for. If something comes to me and said, we think there's fraud, abuse, collusion, money's being missing, I'm going to look into that. But if we have a citizen say, I'm not really happy with what's going on with how you're looking at my request or my permit or something of a regulatory nature, I think my role at this point is to say to your staff, and I do contact them every time I get a complaint, you look into it. I'm not going to interject myself into your role, but let me know what happens. I always look for something to come back to me and say, what was the end result of this? Whether the citizen's happy or not, I want to know either way. I would say to you that if I receive one complaint a year, and that's usually about what it amounts to, I don't get overly concerned about that, and I don't think anyone else would. But if I were to receive 5 or 10 complaints in one area, I'd come back to the chair and come back to the governing board and say, maybe we need to do an audit in this area. We haven't had that happen, and I hope we don't. But I do try to follow up on every complaint I received and make sure it was addressed, whether it was resolved to the satisfaction of the complainant or not. But if we have many complaints, then that's a reason to look into something. The second thing that happened this year, I worked with Tim Alexander, and we had a conflict of interest issue. They contacted me. I've had some experience with conflicts of interest. I'm not an attorney, but I have had some experience there, and they asked for my advice. I provided back to them some attorney general opinions, some thoughts, some questions I would ask, and that seemed to resolve very satisfactorily internally without having to go to the Florida Commission on Ethics. So I think we added some value there. I maintain contact with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and IG, as I mentioned earlier, to see what's going on there. I maintain contact with the Governor's Chief Inspector General, I've known over 30 years, to see what's going on in terms of changes to the Florida Inspector General Act. So I maintain contacts with those. Also, since I've been with LawRed and in my own name, I've conducted 2 quality assurance reviews, one of the St. Johns River Water Management District and the Southwest Florida Water Management District, to see if they're following generally accepted internal audit standards. So I have a relationship with those 2 inspectors general. I communicate with them. We discuss if I have needs and to know about something, they will send me information so I can better understand what they're doing, and they call me and ask me what we're doing so they can better understand what we do. So I think that communication and contact is of a value to the Swanee River Water Management District. Lastly, in April of this year and for the last several years, I provide training to the state of Florida inspectors general and their staff. This past April, I provided training over 2 days to new auditors of how to go about scoping an audit. And the next day, I provided training to audit managers under the state agency inspectors general. We had probably 50 or 60 people there. The 2 inspectors general for the 2 water management districts I mentioned, they were both there. So I'm always pleased to let them know that I work with the Swanee River Water Management District, and so I do that. I have enjoyed and continue to enjoy working with Hugh Thomas, with Tim Alexander, and with Pam. They are all very cooperative. Anything we ask for, we get, and we hope to continue that good working relationship. I'm available at any time you need me. I'm a call away. And we enjoy working with the Water Management District. So with that, I will close, and if you have any questions of me, I'll be pleased to try and answer those.
Any questions from the board? We appreciate good communication for certain.
Well, I'm a phone call away. We're a few miles away, but anytime you need me, you call, and Pam you should have my personal phone number, and call me.
Basically, I have the same thing. I appreciate your input, taking a personal approach to this.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Well, I had owned some land that I just sold to the DEP. It was in the Florida Forever program. It's in what was called the Chapman Rhododendron Protection Zone over in Gaston County. And that land will now be protected forever, and not have to worry about somebody coming in and cutting timber, or that's not a bad thing, but cutting all the timber that I've watched for the last 25 years, or trying to have a sand mine or something else around my timber. So I can relate to what you do, and I certainly appreciate all that you do. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
That's okay. So the recommendation is the acceptance of the annual report of the District Inspector General activities for fiscal year 2024-2025 from Law Reg, Corona, and Monroe.
Motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
We have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, and thank you again,
Ma'am.
Mr. McCall. Our last item is the Inspector General 3-year audit plan for fiscal years 2026 to 2028, and the fiscal year 2025-2026 internal audit work plan.
Madam Chair, committee members, it's a pleasure to be up here again, honestly. So the 3-year plan, 2026, we're every year going to update our risk assessment because the only constant in the world is change. As Sam had mentioned, one of our audits planned for the upcoming year is the revenue and receipts, timber sales. And as he mentioned, we go pretty deep on that audit, looking at was there a forester involved in valuing the land and assessing the timber for harvest and all that. We've got experience doing that work with the Northwest Florida Water Management District, so we'll come in, review our understanding of the statutes and the rules, and be ready to perform that audit. We'll have the 6-month follow-up. We assist with the response to that with the Auditor General's operation audit findings, which we don't have currently. One thing I want to pause and just mention here, because this, for not too long, it took me to figure out, but I always had the question, how does the government audit itself and maintain independence, which is a big thing that's required per the professional standards. And it's always important to remember that the Auditor General and OPAGA are both legislative agencies, and they audit typically the executive branch agencies, which you are neither. And so you kind of fall up under this cool posture of being a component unit of the executive branch of the state of Florida. So there's that. The next thing, because section 20.0556I requires us to address cybersecurity issues in our audit plan, we will have a cybersecurity review of controls at the district. We're basically going off the NIST cybersecurity framework. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar to you, but we previously did the identify and protect modules of the NIST cybersecurity framework, and now we're going into detect, recover, and respond parts of the cybersecurity framework. So that's the plan for the upcoming year. 2027, we've got, again, updating our risk assessment, follow up on prior internal audits, assuming that there will be some from the prior year. You don't see that on current year because, as I reported, we had no observations, findings, recommendations from our audits this year. We do expect the OPAGA report to be released by 2027, and so we will be following up on that if there are any findings from their permitting review. On the plan is competitive selection procurement process, district purchasing policies, procedures for ensuring compliance with section or chapter 287 Florida statutes, including the district solicitation and award process. And then we also have performance measures that we're going to look into in 2027. Then we'll have our annual report again. 2028 looks a little light. That's by design because we want to have a discussion with the board about what you're interested in us looking at, since we do work at the pleasure of the board. So again, the plan is to update the risk assessment, follow up on prior internal audit findings if there are any. Our cybersecurity review this year is going to be looking at mobile device protections and controls that are in place. And then to kind of seed the discussion on what we think would be a good idea to audit in 2028. On the next page, I've got a list of recommended topics for the audit committee to consider. Number one is contract management, which we last audited in 2016, 2017. Number two is permitting fees, receipts, and cash disbursements. Selective sample, including more travel disbursements, just to look at district staff travel. That was last audited in 2014, 2015. And then grant management, which was last audited in 2018, 2019. And now I will ask if there's any questions or discussion about.
Any questions for Jeffrey at this point? Doesn't look like it, Jeffrey. You've just done a good job.
Thank you. And this doesn't have to be an answer that I get today for what we're going to audit in 2028. It could just be something that you take back, consider, and say, hey, we'd be interested in looking into this. And we're, again, a phone call or an email away, a Zoom, a Teams. It's the 21st century. You could throw up a bat signal and I'll respond to it.
Yes,
One
sir.
question.
Uh-huh.
In evaluations around the state and stuff, if y'all uncover new technology and say cyber security through another district or something, do y'all share that information with Tyler? Improved equipment or?
So I believe Tyler communicates more frequently with other technology folks at the district pretty regularly.
Groups in the different districts.
He's a pretty popular guy because I do work with Northwest Florida Water Management District, and Yamila says she checks in with Tyler regularly to see what he's doing. So if we did learn of something that was going on, absolutely, our role is not to, withhold secrets or anything like that. We're sort of in a role to help support operations and management to achieve efficiency and effectiveness. And my role is different from Sam's. He's the inspector general, I'm the audit manager. Anything I see that would improve anything at all, I would certainly give Tyler a call if I saw something that was worth his notice. But again, Tyler, secretly, I might.
You're very fortunate to work with someone like Tyler.
I agree. And I can go right into the work plan, or annual work plan. I went into some detail, as did Sam, but if you just had any questions about the work plan, that would be the last 2 pages. And then our budget for the current year is on that page as well, down at the bottom right. I think it may be,
That'd be fine, yep. That would be on our attachment A, is that what we're looking at?
yes, ma'am. It's my page 32, I believe. And Tyler, if it's on here, it's going to be a page or 2 below where you are. It should be page 32. Sorry. Yeah, this one. Okay, so that first block is the revenues, receipts, timber sales. Second block is following up on the Auditor General's report, cybersecurity report.
Any questions or discussion on our work plan?
Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, Ms. Pam.
So, if the committee wanted to make a choice about one of the items for the 2028 that was recommended by Jeffrey, the contract management, permitting fee, grant management, we could update the 3-year plan, or we can wait and do that at another time. Pleasure of the committee.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd be in favor of choosing contract management. I think that's pretty important, and it's been a while. You know, of the things on the list, that seems like a good choice. Or we could wait.
And that's the recommended list that you're reading from. Does everybody like that list?
I do.
Yep.
I like it.
Okay, yeah, we like it.
Okay, so the recommendation is then to accept the Inspector General's 3-year audit plan with using contract management in 2028 as the additional audited item. And then the fiscal year 2025, 2026 internal audit work plan for Lawrence, Crona, and Monroe.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
That's all I have for you today.
All righty. Thank you very much. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming and being helpful.
Thank you, guys.
All through the audit and being here today.
We're really looking forward to working with you for many, many years. I mean, we've been working with this other guy for a long time. So just go ahead and get ready to be here for a while.
Sounds good. All right. Is there any other item that we need to discuss for the audit committee? No discussion?
I make the motion that we terminate the audit committee's meeting right now.
Second.
And we have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Pam. All right, let's see here. Y'all want to, Lynn, let's go ahead and adjourn and go into our workshop.
Right.
And it's still morning, Sean.
Still morning, got a whole hour. All right, well, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Today I have some updates for you on some of the springs, minimum flows and levels work that we've been doing. Don't have final results for you quite yet. More wanted to give you an overview of some of the particular springs we're working on right now that you'll see more of as we move forward with those MFLs. So kind of a bit of an introduction and then an update on some of the newer things we've been doing with these springs MFLs. And I'll start, there's a picture of Peacock Springs for you, which is, I'd say, one of the nicer ones along the Suwannee River. And as we are, maybe the 5th largest water management district, we are first when it comes to number of springs in the state. And I think in the U.S., this is also considered the densest
world.
concentration. We'll go with that. Most in the world. And you can kind of see that, particularly along the Suwannee River here, each of these circles is a spring, and the color and size represents the magnitude of that spring, which is basically how much flow typically would come out of it. So most of those are along the Suwannee and the Santa Fe here. You can see there's some others scattered about on the coast in particular. And also wanted to highlight that we have two kind of major spring-fed rivers where pretty much all the flow is coming from the aquifer in these springs, which are the Ichetucknee and the Wassissa River. So some pretty unique systems there. So for the Middle Suwannee River, and I've got a few on here for the Upper Suwannee segment as well, we actually have 34 springs that are currently on our minimum flows and levels priority list. And those are basically required to be on there mostly because they're either first magnitude springs or second magnitude springs that are on public property for conservation purposes. So we are required by statute to set MFLs on those particular springs. We also have 4 springs that have been classified as outstanding Florida springs by the legislature. So those are the ones highlighted here: Falmouth, Lafayette Blue, Peacock, and Troy Springs. And those are the 4 that we're particularly focused on right now. And as I'll explain, we're kind of needing to develop some new methods for these springs because they're somewhat unique from like your typical river system like the Ichetucknee. These springs are tend to be a little smaller and very close to the river and have some unique features to them that we're having to account for. So I want to kind of step through each of these and give you a little bit of background on these and why we're coming up with these new methods. I'll start with Lafayette Blue Spring, which is where we've been pilot testing several of these methods. And this is a good example of one of these springs that it discharges quite a bit of water, but pretty quickly that water discharges then into the Suwannee River. And you can kind of see that here. Here's the spring vent, and within a few hundred feet, that clearer water is going into the darker Suwannee River. You can kind of see that here in the image. This spring's also within a state park, as are several of these. So they're, places where people go to recreate and, to see what a spring's like. This is just another image. So this would be if you're kind of standing, looking towards the river. The spring vent itself is down there. And then the Suwannee River's right back there. So like I said, the Suwannee is very close to this spring and has some effect on it. And as far as unique features go, for Lafayette Blue, there's this kind of limestone outcropping that cuts across the spring and actually has a little bit of a tunnel underneath that, where the water will flow when it's at lower conditions like this. And actually people will swim through that little tunnel as well, especially if you go out on a summer day, you'll probably see some kids doing that. So that's just something we're having to kind of think about how to handle as part of our MFL work. But probably one of the more impactful things that I want to highlight is how much the spring is affected by the Suwannee River itself. And as you probably know, the Suwannee River floods pretty regularly, and when it stages up, that darker river water will then come into some of these springs and can actually get high enough to then actually reverse the flow and have river water going into the spring and into the aquifer versus, typically the other way around. And that has a big effect on these springs, definitely in terms of the ecology, but also in terms of recreational usage. Most of these will actually get closed during those times, just because it's not very safe when you can't see into the water well there. But definitely not the aesthetics you would be looking for, when you go to one of these springs also. So that's Lafayette Blue. I just want to show a few images from the other 3 springs we're working on. So for Troy Spring, it's kind of similar. It's a little further downstream. But again, you've got the spring vent, and then not very far downstream there, that water's flowing right into the Suwannee River. Some things about Troy, it is a bit wider, as you can kind of see here, so there's a little more open to sunlight, hitting the water there. The spring vent itself is very deep. It's about 70 feet deep, and people actually go do their scuba check dives there sometimes. Although, from what I've heard, there's not much of a cave system at this one to actually scuba dive into. It's more just that deeper spring vent area. And there is a bit of a historic artifact here. I don't think you can quite see it well, but there's an old steamship from the Civil War era that was intentionally sunk in this spring so that it wasn't captured by the other forces, I guess. And if you go out there, you can usually see some of the remnants of the wooden frame are still down there. Just kind of a fun fact about Troy Spring. And if you go down there, this one is also in a state park, and there's a bit of a platform there by the main spring vent. And if you stand on that platform, you can see out to the Suwannee River there. There's some buoys up to keep boats from coming into the spring area. And the bigger spring vent's kind of, you can't see it here, but it's in the foreground there. And it, like I said, it's very large. All right, and then for Falmouth Spring, this one's a little different. You don't see the Suwannee River in this image. And this spring system's really what we would refer to as a karst window, because what you're looking at essentially is the water flowing through the aquifer. It just happens to come up above land surface briefly. And you have the spring vent there where the water's coming out, and then 400 feet later, it's usually going back in at that Swalette area there. So kind of a neat feature. It's kind of what it looks like there if you're looking up towards that spring vent area. This is another place that can be pretty popular for swimmers in the summer. It's also, this is the one that is not in a state park out of these four outstanding Florida springs. This one's on district property. And want to show, though, even though it's not connected to the Suwannee River over land like the previous two springs, it is connected underground through the conduit system here. And this purple line is showing areas that have been mapped by people who dove and scuba dived into the cave system here. There's actually several sinks along that conduit system where you could enter the cave system if you're brave enough, I guess. And there was also some dye trace work that was done by the Florida Geological Survey where they were able to detect dye injected at Falmouth at 4 springs here on the Suwannee. So Ellaville, Sawanacucci, Lime Spring, and Lime Run Sink were all, had dye detections there when that dye was injected at Falmouth. I just want to point out there were some other springs nearby like Anderson and Stevenson Spring where the dye was not detected. So they were to see that, where that water from the Suwannee, where the spring discharges ultimately to the Suwannee, but also when the river floods, those are the spring vents basically where the water can come back up through the conduit system and actually cause a reverse flow through Falmouth Spring. So, even though it's not connected over land, we still see that effect of the Suwannee River flooding at times.
Madam Chair. What was your next slide, John?
I was going to talk about Peacock.
Just for orientation, I don't know if all the board know where Falmouth is located at. Kind of point out the highways where it's actually located.
Sure.
Relative to the office.
Yeah, so if you're going on 90, basically heading west here, you will pass Falmouth. I think, what is that? That's right after I-10, I think. And it's over there on the left. And if you go a little farther, you'll see Suwannee River State Park on your right. It's kind of in that area. Sure. All right, and then finally for Peacock Spring, this one's also got some unique features. It is kind of like Falmouth, it's a little bit further away from the Suwannee River. So Peacock Spring itself is up here on your top right. I'll zoom into that in a minute so you can see the spring area better. But there's another spring, Bonnet Spring, that's kind of part of this system, and they both will flow together and inundate what we call the Peacock Slough. And so it's about 1.5 miles or so from the springs to the Suwannee River in this case, but there is more of this overland connection. So Peacock Spring itself, that's what you're seeing in the image here. This is what we refer to as P1, which is kind of the main spring vent here. And you can also see in the image, there's a scuba diver getting in. And I would say almost every time I've been there, I've seen scuba divers getting ready to go in the cave system here. It is internationally known for the cave diving and has a very extensive cave system with over 33,000 feet of mapped cave passages. So it's very popular. And you can connect to other sinks and stuff in the park here and do different routes depending on the conditions. So that's one of the values, I think, of that particular spring. For MFL purposes, we are interested in how the flow from the spring inundates this slough area, which has kind of a shallow wetland system that you can see there's some cypress trees growing in there and some other wetland vegetation. But essentially that wetland system needs this spring flow to help maintain it as a wetland. So that's something we're looking into. And then if you kind of zoom in on the upper part where the actual Peacock Springs are, P1 is where that scuba diver was going in the previous image. There's 2 other springs there, although I would say P2 doesn't seem to flow so much anymore. I think the vent has collapsed a little bit in the past. P3 is interesting because at times it acts as a spring and has water coming out, but at other times it will take water. And sometimes this spring's more like Falmouth, where you've got water coming out of P1, flowing a little bit, and then going back into P3. But when the aquifer levels are higher, there is some water that then flows down the channel here and out to the slough. So again, kind of a dynamic system here, very complicated in some ways, especially for MFL purposes, but it's an interesting system.
Madam Chair, I hate to interrupt, but I'm just curious. When we look at the aquifer levels that's reported on monthly, where would you say it would need to be at for P3 to be flowing opposed to taking on water? I mean, is it at 50 percentile or is it something?
I'd have to look into that more. Yeah, there is a particular well we're using that's, I think, 1 mile or 2 away from the spring that really seems to represent the spring flows here pretty well. P3 in particular, we don't have a lot of good data on as to whether it's taking water or, discharging water. What we do have some more information on is when there's water coming through this channel here, which I don't hesitate to throw a number out there, but I think it's, somewhere around 50% of the time, maybe a little less than that. There seems to be water coming out this way, but at times that can still mean that the P3 vent is taking water. It's just not taking enough to then prevent the water from flowing out through that channel. So yeah, it's a bit complicated, and actually the river levels can seem to have some effect on that as well. So yeah, it's something we're looking into, and I can try to report back to you on what that elevation might be. And I mentioned the cave system at Peacock. There's actually cave systems associated with several of these springs. And all of these white lines are areas that have been mapped by cave divers over time. So Peacock, I think, is one of the more extensive ones. And all these are little springs or sinks that are known to be connected to those systems as well. Then Lurville and Telford also has one. And then Lafayette Blue Spring also has, kind of an extensive cave system there. And, part of the reason we think these cave systems exist, there's been research that shows it's actually when that Suwannee River water comes into these cave systems during those flood events, it actually causes some dissolution of the limestone. And so that's probably part, at least, of how these cave systems and these springs formed, over geologic time.
Sure. John, one question. just what criteria makes an outstanding spring? I look at Lafayette Blue from the surface, I'm not real impressed. Peacock and some of the others are nice look. What is it? Cave systems have something to do with it, or?
No, so my understanding, this was, I think, part of legislation passed back in 2016, where there was a list of, I think, 30 springs that received this designation. And most of them are ones that are first magnitude springs. So their average flow would be over 100 cubic feet per second. There were some others that I guess were petitioned, or somehow they were highlighted as ones that should also be on the list. Peacock is one of those. It's a second magnitude spring system, but was recognized that it had special features and was warranted to be on this list and get these additional protections. But yeah, it's mostly based on just the amount of water that would have historically flowed out of the spring. And maybe I can find some better pictures and show you more about Lafayette Blue that you might think it's a little more worthy.
That picture on there, that's real impressive.
Agreed. And actually, I mean, it does have river water in it, we think about 30% of the time now. So, depending on when you go out there, you may not see the bluish color as much, but some of that also might be due to some changes that have happened over, recent decades. That's something we're looking into. But yeah, I don't think the cave systems had too much to do with the designations, except maybe at Peacock, where it's, that spring's really known for the cave diving. Some of these caves are known for having like some unique fauna that live in them, such as these blind crayfish. I'm not aware that we have any like particularly endangered species in these, but some springs will have these unique cave fauna that have adapted particularly at that cave system, and you can't really find them anywhere else.
Well, when you talk about flows, it makes sense with magnitude 1, magnitude 2, but then we have this outstanding designation. I'm just wondering, what's the criteria for it? One of somebody's favorite springs? Or?
Yeah, I think if I understand, the Florida Geologic Survey was consulted some at that time, and they have publications that lay out the first magnitude springs, and I think that was the basis for the reason, most of those were on the list. Purely based on the amount of water coming out of the ground there. All right, so let me tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing for the MFL evaluations. And that starts with kind of better understanding how the Suwannee River affects the flows in these springs, because we need to have a pretty good flow data set to do an MFL evaluation. And usually you can estimate these flows just based on knowing what the level of the water is in the system. But for these springs, the level doesn't tell you the full story. And there's kind of 4 different conditions they could be in, which I'll step through here. One we don't see too often, that's this no flow condition, but basically when the aquifer level is low enough, some of these springs just don't have enough of a head difference to kind of push the water out into the Suwannee River and to generate that actual flow from the spring. What we usually see is that the aquifer level is high enough that it does generate this positive spring flow. And in this case, the Suwannee would be low enough that the spring's basically freely flowing, the river's not having much of an effect there. It's just based on the aquifer levels, essentially, is what's controlling the flow. Some of these springs, like Lafayette Blue, we see, fairly often the Suwannee River is causing some effect on the amount of water coming out of the spring. And you could refer to that as a backwater condition. But essentially, to be able to predict what the flows would be, you have to know both the aquifer level and the river level. And it's that head difference that is driving that amount of flow. And then either because the Suwannee River is particularly high or the aquifer level is a little bit lower, that's when you can get these reverse flow conditions where the Suwannee is actually higher than the aquifer level at that location. And then the water starts flowing from the river into the aquifer. So those are kind of the 4 different potential scenarios there. We're lucky at several of these springs to have pretty good flow records over time. So for Lafayette Blue Spring, we have over 150 measurements where someone's actually gone out there and taking a measurement of the amount of water flowing at that time. And so we can develop these relationships. And like I said, usually you would do this on a river system just based on the river levels. But in this case, we're having to take the aquifer level and the Suwannee River level into account to calculate the difference between those two, at the time these measurements were conducted. And when you do that, you can develop these relationships, based on that head difference, and even get into these negative conditions as well, which, are harder to collect actual flow data for, but we're still, able to create a pretty reasonable relationship here. And then we can use this because we have data sets that have the aquifer level and river level. And so we can use those to actually go back to the 1980s for most of these springs and estimate what the flow would be on any given day. So it's a little more complicated, but I should actually give some, props to Dr. Shaw Wong here at the district. He's really been the one leading the effort on these rating curves and has helped us, basically come up with the flow data sets that we need to do these MFL evaluations. And so once you do that and have that relationship, then we can, again, use the aquifer and river level data to then come up with a daily flow here from 1985. And in this case, we've stopped at 2020 for this analysis. And one thing I think that's a bit striking here that's different from like a Nitchatucknee situation is you see how much the Suwannee River affects the flows. Because all of these downward spikes basically are a time when the Suwannee River was flooding and causing that reverse flow into the spring. If you could kind of ignore those, you would see the spring kind of varying a bit more in this positive range. But we do need to take into account these negative flows for some of the analyses that we're doing. So, this is essentially the process we're going through for all of the springs that we'll be developing MFLs for along the Suwannee. And as I mentioned, it's in a kind of a brownout condition where that river water's in the system about 30% of the time here. And half of that, about 15% of the times when it's actually reverse flowing into the system. But then that river water lingers and takes some time to discharge back out. So the other thing we've been working on, because these springs are fairly complicated, our traditional modeling methods, we're not going to work quite as well. And so we've decided to go with this 2D modeling approach. And as part of that, what we started with was sending surveyors out there to collect the bathymetry data within the spring. So we were able to get data that, shows what the contours of the spring are underwater there. You've got the spring vent, you've got that land bridge feature that I showed earlier that has the tunnel going under it. And then it gets a little shallow there by the river where there's actually this shoal area that has some unique habitat associated with it. And then that was merged with the LiDAR topography data. So all this external part was from the LiDAR data that the district has helped compile. And then we've created a 2D HEC-RAS model that essentially it can take what the spring flow on any given day and the river level as kind of the two boundary conditions. And then we can do different simulations on what the depths, flow velocities, shear stresses, there's other hydraulic parameters we could look at, but they're all parameters we would use to look at things like sedimentation or algae scouring. Some of the different species have habitat curves where they prefer certain depths and velocities. And we can then use this model to basically simulate what the conditions would be on any day. And so here's an example of what that looks like. This is showing the flow velocity, basically how fast the water's moving on a particular day. Kind of at a moderate flow, I would say, where in this case, the water's all going through that tunnel under the land bridge. You can see where the velocities pick up a little bit as that happens. And then they really pick up as you get closer to the river where it gets shallow and there's this shoal area right there. And this, again, there's this particular substrate there. It's more gravelly, which we don't see a lot at these springs. But because of that higher velocity, it keeps all the finer sediments out and actually creates good habitat for darters and some of the other fish species there. So we're able to use this model then to now, we could actually zoom in on any of these particular grid cells and see how that changes over time. And we could start seeing too, as we lower aquifer levels to simulate different pumping conditions that are going on, how that changes the hydraulics in the spring here. So that's kind of a newer thing that we haven't done for springs before. But we think this will, definitely give us some better information for setting MFLs here.
Sean, can you back up a couple of frames?
Sure.
On that, I look at the graph all the way up till about 2014 or so, and then the graph seems to be more consistent. Are we just getting more data or better data, where we don't have the gaps in the ups and downs like we did before, or the length of time that they're down? They seem to be really short and right back up.
So, yeah, Madam Chair, I don't think it has to do with the quality of the data in this case. I think partly what you might be seeing is there have been some drier times, from about 1998 to 2014 or so. And maybe you can kind of see some of these, downward trends more where we weren't getting as much rain, so we weren't getting as many of these flood events. But I think here the spring flow has been up somewhat, but you're still getting those flood events where it's causing more of those, downward peaks there. That's the best explanation I think I could provide at this point. But yeah, if you look at these long enough, yeah, you might see some patterns there that could be explained.
I know in the last 10 or 15 years, we've had some pretty good drought. I'm not old enough to remember back to more than 15 years. But
And maybe you see that. I mean, I think there's some higher times in here with a bit of a trend downward, but it's just, it's harder to see the trends when those flood events.
Well, it just seems so different than the rest of the graph. It's like,
Yeah.
thought maybe more data, maybe we're getting more samples.
Yeah.
I don't know.
John, are all of those, the ones that we've been talking about, are they all in district lands?
So of these four, only Falmouth would be on district land fully, I think. There's some district property near Peacock Spring, but the state park, I think, is owned by the state. Yeah. And then same with Lafayette Blue and Troy. But some of the other springs we're working on are going to be on district, like Telford, for example. So. All right. Any other questions? Just got a few slides left. So, we've now basically got our flow data sets for these springs and are working on the modeling piece. We are still working on the model a little bit. We're seeing a few ways we should probably improve that. But our goal is to get that finalized and we're getting some review on that now as well. And once we've kind of got that to where we think it should be, then we'll develop these models for the other three OFS here. And then the other piece are actually doing more of these MFL calculations related to the different water resource values. We've had to come up with a few new methods here as well. Some of these are based on things you may have seen before, such as fish passage. We're not looking at Gulf sturgeon here, but we are looking at largemouth bass and potential that they could not get back and forth into these springs as much at lower flows. That might be a particular issue at Peacock, where it has that shallow slough between the river and the spring. Recreation, we would typically be boating or paddling on a riverine system. Those activities aren't really even allowed at most of these springs. So it's more the swimming and bathing that are the main recreational features that we're looking at, and basically having good flows to maintain conditions for those activities. Some of these too, we're kind of using the traditional approach, like for in-stream habitat. We have basically what we call habitat curves for 50 different species that basically tell us what velocities and depths they prefer. But one thing we're able to do now with these 2D models is look at that on individual places within the spring and not just kind of for the spring as a whole. So those models are allowing us to do things, I think, at a bit of a more rigorous level. We're also looking at the buildup of algae mats potentially and how those could get scoured out with having maintained flows. There's several aspects of sedimentation we're looking at. So one is just maintaining the channel and the kind of the morphology of the spring runs. I mentioned that gravel substrate at Lafayette Blue that's kind of a unique habitat that the flows help maintain. And then the finer sediments are another one that build up in these springs somewhat and that are related to the flow rates. What I want to highlight today in the last two slides here are these river intrusion events and how we're looking at those from an MFL context. And there's really two kind of aspects to that we're looking at right now. One are just having those brownout conditions where you have that darker water in the system. That affects both recreation as well as the habitat value. Also, we're seeing that if these river intrusion events persist, you can get hypoxic conditions where the oxygen levels drop in the system. And I will say these are fairly natural events. So they're going to happen, to some degree when the Suwannee River floods. But we are seeing too that as the aquifer levels, would come down as they would, as pumping increases in the region, that these events can happen more often and for longer durations. So, we are seeing where MFLs could help, limit the effects of those events.
One question, Sean. A few years back, we did a clean out, so to speak, of Rome Island. Dr. Brown instrumental in that. Have we monitored the change in flow with sedimentation and stuff over those 3 or 4 years?
I'm fairly certain we're getting flow measurements at the spring there, but I haven't looked at it personally to see how that project may have affected it.
I was just curious, as the sedimentation happens, is it changing the flow levels or flow volume? Well, I mean, if we study that fine sedimentation and gravel substrates, would we get a picture of how quick that happens from a freshly reclaimed spring?
Notices the flow pick up after you
Yeah,
clean
is
it
that
out.
something we would want to monitor while it's still fresh and see how it changes?
That could be done. I mean, one of the challenges I think with doing that is you have to account for how much rain and other things are going on at the time too. Yeah, I think that's something that could be evaluated.
And it probably has to do with the amount of traffic it has and everything else, because they stir up sediment when they're in there. So I don't, maybe it's an impossible task, but I thought, well, we got a fresh one there. Maybe it's something we could learn from it, other than people are damaging.
Yeah, we could look into that. And, some of that sediment, I think, comes in with these river intrusion events. That's where we're looking at it in terms of flows and MFLs. I think some of the sediment comes from people, eroding the banks and things over time as well.
Because I know that area where Rum Island is gets considerable flooding in there, but it's packed with people.
Yes.
Always.
For a small area, it's packed.
So again, wanted to just highlight some of the effects of these, what we're calling river intrusion events. And again, another picture from Lafayette Blue, and this one you can see a little more of that bluer water going across the land bridge there. But when we get the brownout conditions, it's pretty dark Suwannee River water at those times. It's very different. And there is actually a USGS gauge that's been set up at the spring, I think since around 2015 or so. And that's where this data is coming from that you see here, which might be a little small on the screen. But what I wanted to highlight is the top graphs, the water levels that are measured at this gauge. And you can see we get these flood events, sometimes big ones like this, where the water level goes up, almost 20 feet or so. And when you get these flood events, again, they were actually measuring a reversal event here. They have velocity sensors, I think, at this gauge that they use to actually measure the flow of the water somewhat and estimate what the overall flow would be. So you get those negative flows. And then for the water quality and the chemistry, you can see a change there as well. So this green line is the specific conductance, which is kind of a measure of the amount of mineral content that's in the water, which tends to be higher in the aquifer water that's been sitting there and with the limestone, especially compared to the Suwannee River water, which is fairly soft and low mineral content. And so you get these downward spikes when that river water starts getting into the system. You can actually kind of know about how much river water is still in the system by looking at these conductivity levels. That I would say probably isn't affecting the biota or anything too much. What can though is the dissolved oxygen level. And so that's the blue line here. And this one's interesting in that usually during these flood events, you actually see a spike in dissolved oxygen initially, because that river water has more oxygen than the groundwater that's coming out of the springs. But we're seeing that if that river water is going into the system and into the aquifer for more than about 8 days, that's when we can have these bigger drops in oxygen as that water comes back out of the system. And I'll show this a little closer on the next slide, but we see those happen pretty regularly. And that, having those lower oxygen levels can really have an effect on the fish and other wildlife that are in these springs, because most wildlife can't persist without some oxygen in the water. And so this is my last slide here. Wanted to show the data more up close for an event that happened last year in the March to May timeframe. Just to get you oriented here, so water levels on the left axis here, that's the orange line. So we were starting at somewhat high river levels at this time. But when they went up above about 30 feet, that's when we saw this effect of the river water getting into the system. And you can see that the blue line's the dissolved oxygen levels here, which are on this right axis. So we saw the spike initially in dissolved oxygen associated with this river intrusion event. And this one's kind of a longer one. It lasted for almost a month here, it looks like. But essentially, the river peaked at some point, and then the river level started coming back down. And that's when more of that river water that went into the aquifer and had been sitting there for a little while starts to come back out through the spring vent, and where this gauge is taking measurements. And that's where you can see the oxygen levels start to go back down. And then at one point, they really basically plummet and go down to about zero. And so we're lucky to have these gauges where we can be basically looking at our computers and seeing what's going on any given day. And, we did send some staff out to see if they noticed anything from this kind of prolonged hypoxic condition that was happening. And sure enough, they did see some dead fish kind of along the spring run there. And so we documented this as a natural fish kill, essentially. And, you know, these do happen. I don't think they've been documented very well. We do have some documentation at Peacock of when crayfish in the cave system have died off in the past from similar events. But again, these happen naturally, but we are seeing that, you know, they could happen more often and for longer as the aquifer levels go down. So that's what we're looking at, you know, from an MFL context, is trying not to have these happen much more frequently, because they do have these negative effects.
So Sean,
That's all I've got.
let's look at that one again.
Okay.
So, the river water reverses and the oxygen levels go up in the spring.
Yes.
Then the river water goes down and the water that was captured in the spring goes out with it. And that's when the oxygen, that just pulls out all the oxygen with it when it leaves.
Yes, I probably left out a piece of information there that the river water that's coming in has a certain amount of organic material in it. And that's most likely, you know, when that water is sitting more in the aquifer, bacteria are then, you know, consuming that organic material and causing that oxygen. They're basically consuming the oxygen as part of that process. So yeah, you'll see that sometimes in lakes where they'll have algal blooms, and then there'll be some consumption of all that dead algae that can depress oxygen levels. This is a little different. This is more just from, you know, material in the Suwannee River water. But yeah, I think that's what's going on. Dr. Brown is kind of an expert on this, so she might could tell you more. Yeah, that's the kind of mechanism that's causing that loss of oxygen.
Sean, back up one more slide. Yeah, on that one. I think I can't read them from here, discharge and flow. They're pretty consistent along, but the quality of the water seems to really go way down all the way across, even on small variations of the discharge. So
That's right. Yes, I think to explain that, one thing I'm not showing on here that's part of this is the aquifer levels. Because if the aquifer levels are also lower, that's more likelihood that the river water can come into the system. And it wouldn't necessarily require as large of a flood or negative flow to have that river water come into the system. I think you're also seeing here somewhat that, you know, just even some of these smaller events here can still basically cause the same river water, you know, to be coming into the system.
right,
So yeah,
it's interesting.
Madam Chair, Sean, Amy, Susie comment on this, but I really think what this shows is the difference in the characteristics of a surface water versus your groundwater. Typically with your groundwater, your springs, we think they are more clear, and I think part of that is because when that river water has gone back into that system and it's there for some length of time, when it reverse flows back out, you've had time for a lot of that organic matter to decompose. You've had it to drop out of suspension. You've had time for sediment within those floodwaters to drop out as well before that water reverses and starts coming back out again. And it's a transition between those two types of water systems itself, which to me is very interesting to see what we have. And then trying to manage what's natural and what's man-made or created by man with that, and that, you know, that change that may be there, may or may not be there with it. That's why we have Sean doing the MFLs, and Sean and his team.
Yeah, and at a future board meeting, I can show you maybe more of the data we're looking at and how we're doing these MFL evaluations. But it's very tied to, you know, the aquifer levels and having a certain amount of river water that can get into the system under different conditions.
Sounds complicated.
Yes.
It will.
Madam Chair, I would add, it was kind of interesting. Gentleman that I spoke with back whenever we were having this fish kill observed on there, and he lifelong Lafayette County resident. And historically, I was talking to him about this and how it changes, and he said, yeah, he goes, we've known that for years, that whenever the river floods and for a period of time, you don't go back to those spring areas, discharge areas. He goes, because you typically, the fishing is poor. He goes, whereas other times it can be great. He goes, but during that time frame, he goes, we don't fish those areas because you just don't get any bites from fishing. I'd never really thought about it in that regard, but it makes sense looking at the biological data with this.
Good questions.
Any other questions? Nope. Thank you, Sean.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Is it good?
That was good. Very interesting. A lot of information. All right. Is there any other conversation, questions, comments? Okay. Then we will entertain closing our workshop. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you. That was very helpful, Sean. Lots of new information. All right.